Hi there. Welcome to Melted Stone, the spot for stories that grab you and won't let you go. If you love drama, surprises, and moments that make you say, no way, you're in the right place. Subscribe and dive into tales full of twists, bold moves, and endings you'll remember. This is Melted Stone. Hit the bell and let's get the story rolling.
Warning. Unidentified person in private room. Security system cannot respond.
Oh my god.
Thomas Blackwood had always believed in control. At 45, he commanded it in every aspect of his existence, from his physique to his boardroom to his breathing. The CEO of ShieldGuard, a cybersecurity firm contracted by multiple government agencies. He lived in a sprawling hillside estate in Northern Virginia with his wife, Rebecca, a former investigative journalist turned corporate consultant, and their teenage son. From the outside, their world seemed bulletproof, a modern fortress of success, privilege, and power. But on Wednesday night, Thomas's personal security system sent a discreet alert to his phone. Movement detected, master bedroom, unregistered biometric signature. He stared at the notification for a long moment, the blue light from his phone illuminating his expressionless face in the darkness of his parked Tesla. He tapped the alert, and the camera feed loaded. The bedroom. His bedroom. Their bedroom. A man, broad-shouldered, shirtless, moved across the frame. Then Rebecca appeared, her silk robe half open, laughing as she pressed her body against the stranger. Thomas watched, unblinking, as her fingers traced the man's chest. "You know he won't be home for hours," she said, her voice clear through the high-definition audio. "He never checks the cameras anyway. Too busy being important." The man, Thomas recognized him now as Victor Raines, CEO of a rival tech firm, smiled with the confidence of a predator who thinks himself untouchable. "Poor Thomas," Victor murmured, his hand sliding beneath Rebecca's robe. "All that security, and he never secured what matters most." Thomas's finger hovered over the screen, not to end the feed, but to save it. He didn't need to. Everything was already being recorded, backed up to 3 separate secure servers. He didn't curse, didn't pound the steering wheel, didn't even blink. Instead, he watched for 17 more minutes as his wife of 18 years betrayed him in their bed. When it was over, he simply placed the phone face down on the passenger seat and drove to a hotel. The next morning, Thomas arrived home at precisely 7:15 a.m. Rebecca was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. Eggs, avocado toast, fresh squeezed orange juice. She smiled when she saw him. "Rough night? You look tired." Her tone was light, practiced, perfect. Thomas kissed her cheek just as he'd done every morning for the past decade. "Conference call with Sol ran late," he said, voice steady. "You know how it goes." She nodded, reaching up to straighten his tie with familiar intimacy. "Poor baby. Want me to make you some coffee?" "Please," he smiled. "You always take such good care of me." As she turned toward the coffee maker, he leaned close to her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "I appreciate that we still trust each other after all these years." Rebecca froze for a fraction of a second, so brief anyone else would have missed it. But Thomas had been studying human behavior for decades. He saw the subtle tension in her shoulders, the microscopic dilation of her pupils. "Of course we do," she said, recovering quickly. "Trust is everything." "Yes," Thomas agreed, taking his seat at the breakfast table. "It is." For 3 weeks, Thomas said nothing about what he'd seen. He kissed Rebecca good night and good morning. He worked late. He attended their son's lacrosse games. He smiled at the right moments during dinner parties. But in the quiet hours, he built his case. In his private office at ShieldGuard headquarters, Thomas deployed the company's most sophisticated surveillance tools against his own wife. Not because he needed more proof of her infidelity. That was already documented, saved, backed up. What he needed was context, motive, the full picture. Within days, he'd planted listening devices throughout their home, Rebecca's car, her gym bag, her favorite coffee shop. He'd cloned her phone remotely, giving him access to every text, email, and photo. He'd installed tracking software on her laptop. The evidence accumulated quickly. Rebecca wasn't just sleeping with Victor. She was helping him orchestrate a hostile takeover of ShieldGuard. And she wasn't alone. Thomas's longtime friend and business partner, Michael Chen, was involved too. Together, they'd been planning for months to force Thomas out during the next quarterly board meeting, using fabricated evidence of financial mismanagement and ethical breaches. Thomas won't fight, Rebecca had said during a late-night call with Victor that Thomas now had on record. He'll walk away quietly to save face. He's too proud to make a scene. And once he's out, Michael had added in a separate conversation, we restructure, merge with Apex Technology, and triple our valuation. Everyone wins. Everyone except Thomas. He compiled everything meticulously. Every betrayal, every lie, every plan to destroy what he'd spent 20 years building. He secured copies off-site in digital vaults, on encrypted servers, and he began to move his own pieces on the board. First, he liquidated $14 million from various investments, transferring the funds to untraceable accounts abroad. Then, he secured his intellectual property by relocating key patents to a shell company in Singapore, legally separate from ShieldGuard, but controlled by a trust in his mother's name. He quietly revoked Rebecca's access to their joint accounts, citing security concerns that the bank didn't question given his reputation in cybersecurity, and he waited for the trap to spring. Thomas, honey. Rebecca's voice was strained through the phone. There seems to be some issue with our cards. I'm at Neiman Marcus, and this is rather embarrassing. Thomas leaned back in his office chair, gazing out at the skyline. Strange. What seems to be the problem? They're saying the cards are declined, all of them. I was just trying to buy that suit you liked for the charity gala. Thomas let the silence hang between them for 3 full seconds. Must be a banking error. I'll look into it. In the meantime, maybe ask Victor to cover it. He seems so eager to provide for you these days. The silence on the other end was deafening. What did you say? Rebecca finally whispered. You heard me. Thomas's voice remained perfectly level. I have to go now. Board meeting. Apparently, there's some concern about unauthorized access to company files. Isn't that strange? He ended the call before she could respond and turned to face his computer screen, where security footage showed Rebecca standing frozen in the middle of the department store, her face drained of color. The war had begun. Thomas had always believed confrontation was a last resort of the unprepared. But there are moments when violence becomes inevitable, when words have run their course, and only action remains. That moment came 3 days after he'd cut off Rebecca's access to their accounts. He was in the garage, methodically organizing tools on his workbench, a habit that had always calmed his mind, when he heard the side door creak open. Thomas didn't turn around. He'd been expecting this. Mr. Blackwood. Victor Raines's voice was smooth, confident. We need to talk. Thomas continued arranging his tools, his back to the intruder. You have 10 seconds to leave my property before I consider this a home invasion. He heard Victor's laugh, short, dismissive. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Rebecca told me about your little financial adjustments. Petty, don't you think? Thomas finally turned, his expression neutral. 4 seconds. Look, Victor stepped closer, his expensive suit out of place, among the tools and motor oil. This was always going to happen. ShieldGuard needs new leadership. The board agrees. Rebecca agrees. Why not walk away with your dignity intact? We're prepared to offer a generous severance. Thomas's hand closed around a wrench on the workbench behind him. Time's up. Victor moved with surprising speed for a corporate executive, lunging forward with a right hook aimed at Thomas's jaw. But Thomas had anticipated this. He sidestepped, bringing the wrench up and around in a devastating arc that connected with Victor's ribs with a sickening crack. Victor doubled over, gasping. Thomas didn't hesitate. He drove his knee into Victor's face, feeling cartilage give way under the impact. Blood sprayed across the concrete floor. You think I'm weak, Thomas said, his voice still eerily calm as Victor sprawled on the ground. Rebecca told you I wouldn't fight, that I'd roll over to save my reputation. He crouched beside the groaning man, gripping Victor's blood-slicked chin and forcing him to make eye contact. But she doesn't know me as well as she thinks. Neither do you. Victor spat blood and tried to struggle to his feet. You're finished, Blackwood. By this time next week, you'll have nothing. Thomas smiled, a cold, terrible expression that never reached his eyes. I've already lost everything that mattered. That means I have nothing left to lose. The fight that followed was brutal and swift. Victor landed a solid blow to Thomas's temple, momentarily stunning him. But Thomas had spent years in martial arts training, a fact his wife had apparently never shared with her lover. He recovered quickly, blocking Victor's neck swing and countering with a precise strike to the throat that left the other man gasping for air. Did Rebecca tell you I served in military intelligence before founding Shield Guard? Thomas asked conversationally, as he methodically dismantled Victor's attempts to defend himself. 2 tours. Special operations. Another blow, this one to Victor's kidney, driving him to his knees. Did she mention I hold patents on 3 different security systems used by federal agencies? A kick that sent Victor sprawling across the garage floor. Or that I've been recording every conversation in my house for the past 5 years, including the ones where you two discussed how to steal my company? Victor tried to crawl toward the door. Thomas allowed it, watching with detached interest. I have everything, Victor. Every text, every call, every meeting in hotels across 4 states, every discussion with Michael about falsifying financial reports. Thomas followed at a measured pace. I have the foreign accounts you set up to funnel money from Shield Guard contracts. I have the offshore shell companies. I have it all. Victor reached the door, fumbling for the handle with bloody fingers. Here's what happens next, Thomas continued, his voice draining of all emotion. You're going to crawl back to your car. You're going to go home, and you're going to wait for the FBI to arrive with a warrant. Because I've already sent them everything. Victor looked up, his face a mess of blood and dawning horror. You're bluffing. Thomas's phone chimed with an incoming message. He glanced at it, then turned the screen toward Victor. It showed a live feed from a street camera, federal agents in tactical gear approaching Victor's home. Am I? Rebecca returned home to find Thomas sitting calmly at the kitchen island, drinking scotch and reviewing documents on his tablet. She stopped short when she saw him, her hand still on the door handle. Where's Victor? She asked, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Thomas didn't look up. In federal custody, I imagine, along with Michael and 3 board members. Conspiracy, wire fraud, securities violations. The usual. Rebecca's purse slipped from her fingers, hitting the marble floor with a dull thud. What have you done? Now Thomas raised his eyes to meet hers. What have I done? That's an interesting question from the woman who was planning to destroy me. It wasn't like that. Save it. Thomas cut her off, his voice like ice. I have recordings of you and Victor discussing how to force me out of my own company. I have the emails you sent to Michael with forged board approvals bearing my electronic signature. I have the transfer records showing how you've been moving our personal assets to accounts in your maiden name. Rebecca's face had gone pale. Thomas, please. I especially enjoyed the part where you told Victor I was too weak to fight back. That I'd just walk away rather than risk public embarrassment. Thomas took another sip of his scotch. You've been sleeping with him for 11 months. Did you ever actually know me at all? Rebecca's composure cracked. She took a step forward, tears welling in her eyes. This isn't fair. You were never here. You built this empire, and I became just another asset. Victor made me feel alive again. Thomas regarded her with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a specimen. And the conspiracy to take my company? Was that also about feeling alive? We were going to offer you a fair deal, she insisted, wiping at her tears. You would have walked away wealthy, with my reputation destroyed and my life's work stolen. Thomas closed his tablet and stood. The FBI has everything, Rebecca. All the evidence, all the recordings, the offshore accounts, the falsified documents. Everyone involved is being arrested as we speak. Rebecca's knees buckled. She grabbed the counter for support. What about me? That depends on you. Thomas moved toward her, his movements measured and precise. Right now, the evidence suggests you were a knowing participant in a criminal conspiracy. But perhaps you were manipulated. Coerced, even. Hope flickered in her eyes. Yes, that's what happened. Victor pressured me. I was afraid. Stop lying. Thomas's voice cracked like a whip. Even now, you can't help yourself. Rebecca flinched as though he'd struck her. Now, what do you want from me? The truth. For once. Thomas leaned against the counter, studying her. Then, we'll discuss terms. Terms? For your cooperation with the federal investigation. For your testimony against Victor and the others. Thomas's smile was a terrifying thing. For your surrender of all claims to our marital assets and property. Understanding dawned on Rebecca's face. You're blackmailing me. I prefer to think of it as negotiating from a position of strength. Thomas slid a thick legal document across the counter toward her. Sign this tonight, and I'll tell the FBI you were an unwitting participant. Refuse, and I'll make sure they see the recordings where you explicitly discuss destroying me. Rebecca stared at the document, then at her husband of 18 years. I never thought you could be this cruel. I never thought you could be this treacherous. Thomas checked his watch. You have 1 hour to decide. I'll be in my office. He walked away without looking back, leaving Rebecca alone with the contract that would strip her of everything she'd plotted to take from him. The media called it the Shield Guard scandal. For 3 weeks, business news was dominated by reports of the attempted corporate coup, the arrests, the securities fraud charges. Thomas Blackwood was portrayed as the victim who fought back, the CEO who uncovered a plot against his own company and delivered the conspirators to justice. Victor Raines faced 20 years in federal prison. Michael Chen had turned state's evidence, accepting a lesser sentence in exchange for his testimony. 3 board members had resigned in disgrace. And Rebecca? She had signed Thomas's agreement. She'd surrendered all claims to their joint assets, accepted a minimal divorce settlement, and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. In return, Thomas had characterized her to investigators as a peripheral figure who had been manipulated by Victor, not a willing conspirator. It wasn't mercy that had motivated this arrangement. It was calculation. Thomas wanted Rebecca free, but broken, humiliated, watching as her world collapsed around her. The legal proceedings moved with unusual speed, facilitated by the mountain of evidence Thomas had compiled and his connections in federal law enforcement. Within 2 months, the divorce was finalized. Thomas retained the house, the majority of their assets, and full custody of their son, who had chosen to distance himself from his mother after learning of her betrayal. For most men, this would have been enough. Vindication, justice, victory. But Thomas wasn't most men. The charity gala was held at the Fairmont Hotel, a glittering affair attended by Washington's elite, politicians, executives, influencers. Thomas arrived alone, immaculate in a black tuxedo, his expression revealing nothing of the storm that had ravaged his personal life. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting condolences and congratulations with equal grace. Everyone wanted to speak to him, the man who had survived betrayal and emerged stronger, the phoenix rising from the ashes. He was at the bar when he spotted her. Rebecca stood across the room, wearing a midnight blue gown that hugged her figure. She was talking to a silver-haired senator, her smile brittle but determined. She had lost weight, Thomas noted clinically. The circles under her eyes were concealed by skilled makeup, but visible to anyone who knew where to look. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom. Rebecca faltered mid-sentence, her glass freezing halfway to her lips. Thomas raised his own glass in a mocking toast, then turned his back on her and continued his conversation with the Defense Department contractor beside him. An hour later, he felt a touch on his arm. Rebecca stood behind him, her expression carefully composed. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice barely audible above the orchestra. "Please." Thomas excused himself from his group and followed her to a quieter corner of the ballroom. "This is surprising. I wouldn't have expected you to show your face here." "I still have friends," Rebecca said, lifting her chin. "Not everyone believes the story you've constructed." "It's not a story. It's documented fact." Thomas studied her with cold detachment. "What do you want, Rebecca?" "I want to see my son. He doesn't want to see you. Because of what you've told him." "I showed him the recordings," Thomas interrupted. "I let him hear his mother plotting to destroy his father. I didn't have to tell him anything." Rebecca's composure slipped, pain flashing across her features. "He's still my child. You should have considered that before you decided to betray his family." Thomas's voice remained level, reasonable. which somehow made his cruelty more pronounced. Is that all? I have people waiting. Thomas, please. Rebecca's hand caught his sleeve. What you're doing, this systematic destruction, it isn't justice. It's vengeance. Semantics. Thomas removed her hand from his arm. You tried to take everything from me. I'm simply returning the favor. And when does it end? Rebecca's eyes glistened with unshed tears. When I've lost everything? When I'm destitute? When I'm in prison despite your supposed protection? Thomas leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. It ends when I decide it ends, and I'm nowhere near finished with you yet. He stepped back, his mask of civility sliding back into place. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Rebecca. I understand the crab cakes are excellent. He walked away, rejoining his conversation as if nothing had happened. Across the room, a waiter approached Rebecca with a silver tray bearing a single envelope. Inside was a flash drive and a handwritten note. For those friends who don't believe the story, complete recordings of your conversations with Victor. I wonder what the senator you were just speaking to would think if he heard them. Your choice. Leave now, or I release these to everyone in this room. Rebecca's hands shook as she read the note. She looked up to see Thomas watching her from across the ballroom, his expression impassive. She turned and fled. The final confrontation came 3 weeks later in the rain-slicked parking garage beneath Thomas's office building. He was walking to his car, briefcase in hand, when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to see Victor Raines, out on bail pending trial, emerging from between two parked SUVs. Blackwood. Victor's once handsome face was marred by the aftermath of their garage fight, his nose slightly crooked from where it had been broken and reset. We have unfinished business. Thomas set his briefcase down carefully. You're violating your bail conditions. Not very smart. Smart stopped mattering the day you destroyed my life. Victor stepped closer, water dripping from his raincoat onto the concrete. You think you've won, don't you? The conquering hero? The wronged husband who fought back. I did win. Thomas remained perfectly still, evaluating distances, angles, potential weapons. You're facing 20 years in federal prison. Your company's stock has collapsed. Your wife has filed for divorce. And Rebecca has learned the cost of betrayal. Victor's laugh was a harsh, broken sound. You arrogant bastard. You think this ends with me in prison and you keeping your perfect life? There are things you don't know, people you haven't accounted for, such as your precious evidence. It's compromised. We had a backup plan, insurance, you might say. Victor's smile was feral, desperate. By this time tomorrow, the FBI will be looking at you instead of me. The tables are about to turn, Blackwood. Thomas sighed, a sound of genuine disappointment. Victor, Victor! Even now you can't help overplaying your hand. He reached into his pocket and produced a small digital recorder, pressing play. Victor's voice filled the echoing space. Your precious evidence? It's compromised. We had a backup plan. Thomas stopped the recording, attempting to obstruct justice, threatening a witness. That should add a few years to your sentence. Victor's face contorted with rage. You son of a bitch! He lunged forward, pulling something from beneath his coat. A flash of metal that caught the fluorescent light. A knife. Thomas reacted with the speed and precision of a man who had trained for precisely this scenario. He pivoted, catching Victor's wrist as the blade slashed toward him. Using his attacker's momentum against him, Thomas drove Victor backward into the concrete pillar behind them. The impact knocked the wind from Victor's lungs. Thomas maintained his grip on the knife hand, twisting until bones snapped. Victor screamed as the weapon clattered to the ground. What was the plan? Thomas asked calmly, as if they were still having a civil conversation. Stab me in a parking garage and hope it looked like a robbery? Victor struggled against Thomas's hold, his broken wrist hanging at an unnatural angle. That you deserve to suffer for what you've done. What I've done? Thomas's control finally slipped, rage bleeding into his voice. I built something. I created value. I protected this country's infrastructure. And you tried to steal it because you couldn't build something of your own. The security cameras recorded what happened next. Thomas Blackwood, CEO of Shield Guard, methodically dismantling Victor Rains in a brutal, efficient display of violence that lasted exactly 47 seconds. When it was over, Victor lay unconscious on the garage floor, bleeding from his nose and mouth. Thomas straightened his tie, retrieved his briefcase, and called 911. There's been an incident in the parking garage at 1835 K Street, he reported, his breathing only slightly elevated. Victor Rains attacked me with a knife. He's unconscious but breathing. You'll find the assault on the security cameras. And yes, I'd like to press charges. He ended the call and knelt beside Victor's prone form. You never understood, did you? I didn't just prepare for the betrayal after I discovered it. I've been preparing my entire life, always watching, always planning, always 3 steps ahead. Victor groaned, his eyes fluttering open. Thomas leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Rebecca couldn't destroy me. You couldn't destroy me. And do you know why? He smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. Because I was willing to destroy myself first, if that's what it took to win. In the distance, sirens wailed. Thomas stood, adjusted his cuffs, and waited for the authorities to arrive, his expression once again a mask of perfect control. 6 months later, Thomas Blackwood sat alone in his home office, watching the sunset paint the Virginia skyline in shades of gold and crimson. On the screens before him, news reports detailed the outcome of Victor Rains' trial, guilty on all counts. 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. The attack in the parking garage had been the final nail in Victor's coffin. Surveillance footage had shown him lying in wait, producing the knife, lunging at Thomas. The prosecution had painted it as a desperate attempt to silence the primary witness against him. Thomas's phone chimed with an incoming text. It was from his son, now in his first semester at MIT, saw the news about Rains. Hope this gives you some peace. Love you, Dad. Thomas smiled, a genuine expression this time, not the cold mask he'd worn throughout the ordeal. Love you, too. Focus on your studies. I'm fine. He set the phone down and swiveled his chair to face the wall of windows. Shield Guard had not just survived the attempted coup. It had thrived. Stock prices had soared after Thomas had emerged as the victorious defender of the company. New government contracts had poured in. The board, newly constituted with loyalists, had granted him even greater control. And Rebecca? Thomas opened a secure browser window and checked the tracking software he still maintained on her accounts. She had moved to Chicago, taken a job at a small PR firm under her maiden name. Her social media presence had been scrubbed. She lived modestly in a 1-bedroom apartment, her extravagant lifestyle a thing of the past. He had won, completely and utterly. So why did victory taste so hollow? A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. His housekeeper stood in the doorway. Sir, there's someone here to see you. She says it's important. Thomas frowned. He wasn't expecting visitors. Who is it? Ms. Elena Vega, from the Justice Department. Thomas's eyes narrowed slightly. He knew the name. One of the prosecutors who had worked on the Shield Guard case. Show her in. Elena Vega entered his office with the confident stride of someone accustomed to power. Mid-40s, impeccably dressed, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Mr. Blackwood. Thank you for seeing me without an appointment. She extended her hand, which Thomas shook after a moment's hesitation. How can I help the Justice Department, Ms. Vega? Thomas gestured to the chair across from his desk. I thought the Rains case was concluded. It is. Elena sat, placing a thin portfolio on her lap. I'm here about a different matter, one that concerns you more directly. Thomas's expression revealed nothing. I am listening. During our investigation into Victor Rains and the conspiracy against Shield Guard, we uncovered certain irregularities in your own conduct. Elena opened the portfolio and removed several photographs, spreading them on the desk between them. These were taken 3 weeks before you reported the conspiracy to federal authorities. Thomas glanced at the photos. They showed him meeting with a man he recognized as a former NSA cybersecurity specialist, someone who had helped him gather intelligence on Victor and Rebecca. I don't see the relevance, Thomas said, his voice even. I hired a security consultant during a period when I suspected corporate espionage. Completely legitimate, except Mr. Hawkins isn't just a security consultant. He's known for operating in legal gray areas. Elena removed another document from her portfolio. This is a warrant we executed on his premises last week. We found evidence that he hacked into private accounts belonging to Victor Rains, Rebecca Blackwood, and Michael Chen. Using techniques that violate federal law. Thomas leaned back in his chair. And if Hawkins broke the law, that's between him and the Justice Department. I hired him for legal security consulting. Did you? Elena's gaze was penetrating. Because we also found financial transfers from an offshore account linked to you. Transfers that coincided with specific intrusions into private systems. I have many investments, Thomas said, his calm unbroken. If one of them was misused without my knowledge, Mr. Blackwood? Elena interrupted him with a raised hand. Let's not waste each other's time. We both know what happened here. You discovered your wife's affair. You discovered the conspiracy against your company. And instead of immediately reporting it to authorities, you conducted your own illegal surveillance operation to gather additional evidence and to prepare your counterattack. She leaned forward. You broke the law, Mr. Blackwood. Multiple laws. And while the ends might seem to justify the means, after all, Victor Rains and his co-conspirators were genuinely guilty. The Justice Department can't ignore federal violations, just because we like the outcome. Thomas remained silent for a long moment, studying Elena Vega with the same clinical detachment he'd shown Rebecca during their final confrontation. What do you want, Ms. Vega? He finally asked. Cooperation. Elena closed her portfolio. There's a larger investigation underway into corporate espionage in the defense sector. Victor Rains wasn't acting alone. He had backers, possibly foreign interests. We need someone on the inside, someone with your expertise and connections to help us identify and neutralize these threats. Now Thomas smiled, the cold, calculating expression that had become his trademark. You're asking me to become an informant. I'm offering you a chance to avoid prosecution for violations that could send you to prison alongside the man who tried to destroy you. Elena stood. Poetic, don't you think? You and Victor Rains, sharing a cell block after all. Thomas rose to his feet, moving to the window. Below, his manicured grounds stretched into the distance, a kingdom he had defended at all costs. And if I refuse, then I present my evidence to a grand jury next week. Thomas turned to face her. You're bluffing. The case against Rains would collapse if you revealed that the primary evidence was illegally obtained. Rains is already convicted. Double jeopardy applies. Elena shrugged. And frankly, the Justice Department is more concerned with national security threats than with one corporate coup, however dramatic it might have been. For the first time since the ordeal began, Thomas Blackwood felt control slipping from his grasp. The perfect revenge he had orchestrated, the complete and total destruction of those who had betrayed him, had left one loose end. Himself. How long? He asked, his voice betraying nothing of the calculations racing through his mind. 2 years. Your cooperation remains confidential. Your reputation stays intact, and when it's over, all charges are dropped. Elena extended a business card. You have until Monday to decide. After she left, Thomas returned to his desk and opened his secure laptop. Within minutes, he had accessed everything the Justice Department had on him. Every file, every photograph, every piece of evidence Elena Vega had carefully omitted from their conversation. It was worse than she had suggested, far worse. Not just illegal surveillance, but evidence tampering, witness intimidation, computer fraud, enough to put him away for a decade. Thomas closed the laptop and poured himself a scotch, neat. The amber liquid caught the last rays of the setting sun as he raised it to eye level. To victory, he murmured, a bitter smile playing at his lips, whatever the cost. He drained the glass in one swallow and picked up his phone. He had a call to make. The war wasn't over yet. 1 year later, Thomas Blackwood stood at the podium in Shield Guard's main conference room, cameras flashing as he announced the company's expansion into international markets. The stock had doubled since the Rains affair. The new board members regarded him with a mixture of fear and reverence. The company had never been stronger, and Thomas had never felt more hollow. His cooperation with the Justice Department had proven valuable. 3 foreign operatives had been identified within competing firms, A network of corporate spies had been dismantled. Elena Vega had been pleased, extending his deal for another 6 months with promises of full immunity when the operation concluded. But the cost had been high. The constant vigilance, the lies, the knowing that his perfect revenge had, in the end, ensnared him in a trap of his own making. After the press conference, Thomas retreated to his office, loosening his tie as the door closed behind him. His phone buzzed with a message from an encrypted number. Meeting set for tonight. 8 p.m. The usual place. Another operation. Another night spent helping the government that had leveraged his own crimes against him. Thomas typed a brief acknowledgement and set the phone down, turning to the window. The intercom on his desk buzzed. Mr. Blackwood, there's a Rebecca Miller here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment. Thomas froze. Rebecca Miller. Rebecca's maiden name. After a year without contact, she had come to him. Send her in, he said, his voice betraying nothing of the surprise he felt. Rebecca entered, closing the door behind her. She looked different. Hair shorter, face thinner, clothes simpler than the designer outfits she'd once favored. But her eyes were the same, determined, intelligent, dangerous. Hello, Thomas. She remained by the door, as if uncertain of her welcome. Rebecca. He didn't offer her a seat. What brings you back to D.C.? Information? She moved further into the room, her movements cautious. About Victor Raines. Thomas's expression hardened. Victor is serving 25 years. He's no longer relevant. That's not entirely true. Rebecca placed a flash drive on his desk. This came to me through a former colleague at the Tribune. There's evidence that Victor was working with foreign interests when he targeted Shield Guard. Not just for financial gain, but to access your government contracts. Thomas stared at the flash drive, his mind racing. This was exactly the kind of intelligence the Justice Department wanted, the missing piece in their ongoing investigation. Why bring this to me? He asked, making no move to take the drive. Why not go to the FBI? Rebecca met his gaze directly. Because despite everything that happened between us, I still care about this country's security. And because I thought you should know that they're coming for you next. Thomas's eyes narrowed. Explain. Victor wasn't working alone. There were others. Powerful people who wanted access to Shield Guard's security protocols. People who are still out there. Rebecca moved closer to the desk. They know about your deal with the Justice Department. They know you've been helping build cases against their associates. And they've decided you're a liability. How do you know this? Thomas kept his voice level, betraying nothing of the alarm bells ringing in his mind. Because they approached me. Rebecca's mouth curved in a bitter smile. They thought I'd want revenge, that I'd help them get to you. Thomas studied her face, searching for deception. And you don't? Want revenge? I did. For months, I fantasized about seeing you suffer the way I've suffered. Her voice cracked slightly. But this isn't about us anymore. These people, they're not after corporate control or money. They want the backdoor access codes to the defense system Shield Guard protects. Thomas reached for the flash drive, turning it over in his fingers. Why should I believe you? You shouldn't. Not without verifying everything yourself. Rebecca stepped back. That's why I brought the drive. Names, dates, account numbers. Everything I could gather without tipping them off. Thomas slipped the drive into his pocket. If this is true, you've put yourself at risk by coming here. I know. Rebecca's eyes, once so familiar, now looked tired beyond their years. Consider it partial atonement. Thomas walked to the window, his back to his ex-wife, as he processed this new information. If she was telling the truth, his carefully constructed world was about to implode again. If she was lying... There's something else you should know, Rebecca said quietly. They've compromised Elena Vega. Thomas turned sharply. What? Your Justice Department handler. She's working with them, has been from the beginning. Rebecca's face was grim. She's not building cases against foreign operatives. She's identifying vulnerabilities in our systems and passing the information along. That's a serious accusation, Thomas said, his mind already racing through every interaction he'd had with Elena, searching for inconsistencies, warning signs he might have missed. Check the drive. There's a recording of her meeting with a Russian operative last week. Rebecca moved toward the door. I should go. Being seen with you is dangerous for both of us. Thomas found himself speaking before he could consider the implications. Where are you staying? I'm not. My flight back to Chicago leaves in 3 hours. She paused, hand on the doorknob. This doesn't change anything between us, Thomas. I still despise what you did to me. And I haven't forgotten your betrayal. His voice was cold, but something in his eyes had shifted. But if what you're saying is true, then we both have enemies more dangerous than each other. Rebecca finished his thought. Good luck, Thomas. You're going to need it. After she left, Thomas removed the flash drive from his pocket and stared at it for a long moment. Then he made a decision. Instead of plugging it into his computer, he picked up his secure phone and dialed a number he'd memorized but never used. This is Blackwood, he said when the line connected. I need to speak to Director Harrison. Authorization code Sierra 9 Delta 4. The line went silent for a moment, then a gravelly voice answered. Blackwood. This is unexpected. Sir, we have a situation. I believe the Operation Kingfisher has been compromised. Thomas's voice was steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. Elena Vega may be a double agent. A sharp intake of breath on the other end. Those are serious allegations. What evidence do you have? Nothing I'm willing to transmit electronically. We need to meet. My office, 1 hour. The line went dead. Thomas pocketed the phone and opened a hidden safe behind a painting on his wall. Inside was a Glock 19, which he checked and holstered at his back, concealed beneath his suit jacket. From another compartment, he removed a passport and credentials in a name that wasn't his. If Rebecca was right, if Elena Vega had betrayed her country and set him up in the process, then Thomas was now a marked man. The hunter had become the hunted. As he prepared to leave, his private phone buzzed with a text. The sender was unknown, but the message chilled him to the bone. She told you, didn't she? Unwise. The Kane Hotel, room 1214. Now, or we release everything. Attached was a photo of his son on the MIT campus, clearly taken within the last hour. Thomas felt something inside him shift. A cold, deadly calm, descending like a shroud. They had threatened his son. The one line no one was permitted to cross. The war he thought he'd won was about to enter a new phase. And this time, Thomas wouldn't stop until every last enemy was destroyed. The Kane Hotel rose 40 stories above downtown D.C., its glass facade reflecting the afternoon sun. Thomas parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, every sense heightened, scanning for surveillance, for threats, for any sign that this was an ambush. He spotted 2 men in the lobby who didn't belong. Their posture too rigid, their attention too focused. Security or assassins, it made little difference. He changed course, entering through the service entrance with a confidence that prevented any staff from questioning his presence. In the service elevator, he removed his tie and suit jacket, inverting the latter to reveal a hotel staff uniform pattern on the inside, one of many precautions he'd incorporated into his wardrobe since beginning his work with the Justice Department. Room 1214 was at the end of a long hallway. Thomas approached cautiously, noting the "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door handle. He knocked twice, then stepped to the side, hand reaching beneath his disguised jacket to grip his weapon. The door opened partially. Mr. Blackwood. The voice was male, accented, Eastern European. Please come in. We've been expecting you. Thomas didn't move. Who's we? Friends of Victor Raines. Concerned about your recent activities? Let me see my son first, prove he's safe. A chuckle from behind the door. Your son is fine, for now. That photo was merely motivation. Please, time is short. Thomas calculated his options. Going in was a risk. Refusing was a greater one. I'm armed, he said flatly. Any sudden movements, and this conversation ends permanently. As you wish. Thomas pushed the door open fully, revealing a suite decorated in neutral tones. Seated at a desk by the window was a man in his 60s, silver-haired and immaculately dressed. Standing beside him was a younger man, the source of the accented voice. Mr. Blackwood. The older man gestured to a chair across from him. Thank you for joining us. I'm Charles Denton, though my colleagues sometimes know me as Archangel. The code name triggered recognition. Archangel, rumored to be a high level intelligence operative, who had gone rogue years ago, selling his services to the highest bidder. A ghost in the international intelligence community, never confirmed to exist. What do you want? Thomas remained standing, his right hand still poised near his concealed weapon. Direct. I appreciate that. Denton smiled thinly. I want to offer you a choice, Mr. Blackwood. One more favorable than the options currently available to you. I'm listening. Your cooperation with the Justice Department has become problematic for certain interests. Interests that invested considerably in the operation you helped dismantle. Denton opened a laptop on the desk, turning it to face Thomas. This contains evidence of your illegal activities prior to your arrangement with Ms. Vega. Activities that went far beyond what the Justice Department is aware of. The screen showed footage Thomas had never seen. Himself meeting with a known hacker in a parking garage, exchanging an envelope for a flash drive. Where did you get this? Thomas's voice remained steady despite his internal alarm. Your wife was not the only one monitoring your activities during those tumultuous months. Denton closed the laptop. We have much more. Enough to ensure that you spend the rest of your life in a federal prison, regardless of whatever immunity deal you've arranged. And the alternative? Work with us. Your expertise, your access to government systems, they're invaluable. In exchange, this evidence disappears. Denton leaned forward. And your son remains safe at MIT, blissfully unaware of his father's precarious situation. The threat was clear. Thomas felt rage boiling beneath his composed exterior. You're asking me to betray my country. I'm asking you to make a practical decision. Denton's smile never reached his eyes. You've already demonstrated remarkable flexibility in your ethical boundaries. This is merely an extension of that pragmatism. Thomas moved to the window, seemingly considering the offer while actually assessing the tactical situation. 2 men in the room, possibly more outside. The younger man was armed. Subtle bulge beneath his jacket, right side. How do I know you'll keep your word? Thomas asked, turning back to face Denton. That the evidence will actually be destroyed? You don't. But consider the alternative. Denton's voice hardened. Immediate arrest. Public disgrace. Your son learning that his father is no better than the man who tried to destroy him. Thomas nodded slowly, as if weighing his options. I need time to think. You have until midnight. Denton stood. My associate will contact you for your answer. As the younger man moved toward the door to show Thomas out, Thomas made his decision. In one fluid motion, he drew his weapon and struck the younger man across the temple with the butt of the gun. The man crumpled to the floor as Thomas pivoted, training the weapon on Denton. I've made my decision, Thomas said, his voice deadly calm. You threatened my son. That was your last mistake. Denton's composure finally cracked. You're making a grave error, Blackwood. You can't fight all of us. I won't have to. Thomas reached into his pocket with his free hand and removed a small device. This entire conversation has been transmitted to Director Harrison at NSA headquarters. That photo you sent of my son? I recognize the digital signature. It came from Elena Vega's personal device. Denton's eyes widened slightly, the only indication that Thomas had scored a direct hit with his bluff. You're lying. Am I? Thomas smiled coldly. Special forces are currently surrounding this building. Elena Vega has already been taken into custody. Your operation is finished, Archangel. Before Denton could respond, the hotel room door burst open. 2 men in tactical gear rushed in, weapons raised. Federal agents! Hands where we can see them! Thomas kept his gun trained on Denton as the agents secured the room. Only when Denton was in handcuffs did Thomas lower his weapon. Agent Blackwood, one of the tactical team, addressed him. Director Harrison sends his regards. Says you can consider your probationary period complete. Thomas nodded, the adrenaline slowly ebbing from his system. The laptop on the desk contains evidence. Secure it. As the agents led Denton away, Thomas retrieved his phone and dialed a secure number. It's done. Archangel is in custody. Good work, Director Harrison's voice replied. And the Vega situation? Confirmed. She was working with them. Thomas moved to the window, watching as unmarked vehicles surrounded the hotel below. Sir, there's one more thing. Go on. Rebecca Blackwood. She provided the intelligence that led to this. I want assurances of her safety. A pause on the line. Considering her previous involvement, she acted as a patriot today, Thomas interrupted. Whatever happened between us personally is irrelevant. Very well. We'll arrange protection. Harrison's tone shifted slightly. Thomas, this doesn't change your legal situation regarding the methods you used against Raines and your ex-wife. I understand that. Thomas watched as Denton was loaded into one of the waiting vehicles. But it does prove my loyalty. Yes, it does, Harrison sighed. Report to headquarters for debriefing. We'll discuss your future with the agency then. Thomas ended the call and took one last look around the hotel room. The younger man was being secured by the agents still unconscious from Thomas's strike. The laptop was being placed in an evidence bag. He had survived. Again. Turned the tables on those who thought they could control him. Again. But as he left the hotel through a secure exit provided by the tactical team, Thomas felt no triumph, only a bone-deep weariness. The cycle of betrayal and revenge seemed endless, a labyrinth with no exit. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. They're saying you saved the day, again. Does it feel like victory this time? Rebecca. Somehow she knew. Thomas didn't respond. There was nothing left to say between them. The war was over, but peace remained elusive. As he slid into the back of a waiting federal vehicle, Thomas Blackwood, former CEO, betrayed husband, reluctant hero, closed his eyes. The quiet man's war had come at a devastating cost. To his enemies, to his family, and most of all, to himself. The end.